Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I really appreciate it. When I can speak at a place that's only 60 miles away from home, I love it. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I thought maybe we were going to start a little bit like church with nobody sitting in the front couple of rows here, but it's filled in since then. But I would like to introduce a couple of people before I begin. Chris Hansen is joining me today. He is my campaign manager, and so if you're, if you can't find me and you need to get a hold of somebody, please feel free to contact Chris. And I'd like to also introduce Ben Albright, who is with my opponent's campaign, who we've become actually good friends with over the past couple of months. So welcome, Ben, to Sterling. What an opportunity we have in November of 2010 to get this country back on track, to start creating jobs again, to be proud of the greatest nation on the face of this earth. I grew up in Yuma, Colorado, about 60 miles away. I love going to a place where I don't have to explain where Yuma is. Because I was like, Yuma, really? Can you run for Congress from Arizona? I said, no, not Yuma, Arizona, Yuma, Colorado. And so trying to explain where Yuma is, though, has been a challenge. And so I usually end up saying, well, if you don't know where Yuma is, it's between Otis and Eckley on the Eastern Plains. And that usually doesn't narrow it down enough, so I have to say, well, it's over by Kansas, and that can usually answer most questions. Or it's the place that goes by on the bottom of the television screen, severe thunderstorm, take cover, and that helps too. But my wife and I have a 6-year-old daughter who is she's the light of our lives. They're actually over on the western slope today. My wife had started her own business a couple of years ago when they were traveling for business in the western slope, went down to Mesa Verde. So our daughter was traveling through Mesa Verde for the first time, went to the Four Corners, and I think having a wonderful time. But if those of you are familiar with Yuma, you've also probably driven on the highway by a farm equipment dealership named Farmers Implement Company. That's our family farm equipment dealership. I grew up at the implement dealership, working at the parts counter, sweeping the floors. In fact, when I first ran for the state legislature, I would often go around the district introducing myself to people saying, I'm Cory Gardner, I've met most of you at the implement dealership, I've sold half of you the wrong parts. I actually quit using that line when everybody in the room was shaking their head yes. But it's I learned a lot at the implement dealership about people's business, people's lives, what it is that makes them tick, and what we need from a government, and what they are hoping that their government will not only stand for, but what their government can do to get out of the way to again create the kind of opportunities that this nation is so abundantly blessed with. Our 6-year-old daughter has just been a tremendous influence on my life. And when I talk about what's happened to this country, whether it's economically, whether it's around the world, I often think back of a moment when we were driving between Yuma and Ray, and we drove by a feedlot, and it was dusk toward the evening, and the lights on the feedlot were on, and I asked her, this is several years ago, I turned around and I asked her, can you see the cows over there? And she looked at me and she said, no, Daddy, the dark is in the way. And I thought, through the eyes of a 4-year-old, this is several years ago, through the eyes of a 4-year-old, the dark is in the way, and all we need to do is get rid of the dark, and then we can see them again. And that's the way I really look at how we can get this country moving again. We need to make sure that we are once again confident that we can restore this country economically and the liberties that this nation was founded on. And so whether it's the implement dealership in Yuma, Colorado, whether it's the business that my wife has run, I realize every day how important it is that we again restore opportunities for those of you in this room to build their own successes, to create opportunities for themselves and their family. If you go down to the corner of 2nd Avenue and Main Street in Yuma, you'll see a little concrete block that says, it's all covered up by bricks now, that says J.A.S. & Son, 1910. That was my great-great-granddad's hardware store. He moved his family from the eastern United States to Yuma to build a better life, to start their own business. And if we don't change the direction of this country, getting it back on track, my daughter, your sons and daughters may never have an opportunity again to do what people like my great-great-granddad did. And that's to start a better life for themselves and build their own future and their own successes. This November, we've got an amazing choice before us. We hear often, every 2 years, this is the most important election of our lifetime. But when you say that this year, it really is. A nation that faces trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars worth of debt. Trillions of dollars worth of deficit spending. A nation whose government is growing at breakneck pace, hiring tens of thousands of new IRS agents, regulations that will squeeze out small businesses, healthcare bills that are going to force this nation even further into debt. A cap and trade bill that will cost farmers and ranchers, industry in this country, more money than they can afford, and the result will be they will move overseas. So it really is the most important election, because that choice then is this in November of 2010. Do we continue to pursue a path of more government, more regulation, less freedom, more spending? Or do we choose to go the path where we know that we can run our lives better than any government could, that we can run our businesses better than any government ever could, that we can create opportunity for our families by getting government out of the way, by making sure we stop the spending, we reduce the budget, and we make sure that we empower ourselves and our families to make decisions for us instead of a bureaucrat behind a desk. That's the choice that this November offers. And I've said time and time again that this election that we are running in 2010 focuses on our first principles. Our first principles of limited government, fiscal responsibility, and that when we send somebody to Washington, D.C., we're sending them there to represent the people in Sterling, Colorado on Main Street, throughout the 4th Congressional District, and the people of this country, who simply want their representative in Congress to do what is right for the people, to abide by the Constitution, and make sure that the future generations of this country aren't sold down the river for instant gratification today. The healthcare bill. The healthcare bill that passed the United States Congress is being argued in the United States federal court about whether or not it should be allowed to continue. And the argument that the federal court is putting on the bill, putting in favor of the bill, is that this is a legal healthcare bill because it's a tax. The healthcare bill is a tax, and the federal government has a right to tax the American people. That's their justification for the healthcare bill. Well, remember what was said early on in the healthcare debate? This isn't a tax. Remember what was said early on, that no taxes will be increased on people earning less than $250,000? And yet here we are with a healthcare bill that will cost over $2 trillion, add to our nation's debt and deficit. And it's now being argued for by the federal government because it is a tax. A cap and trade bill. How many of you irrigate on REA, get your water from the REAs or electricity from the REAs? You received a letter from your local REA in the mail that said if you have a sprinkler, 1 meter for your sprinkler is going to cost about $1,700 more a year to operate if cap and trade were to become law. And the stimulus bill that was supposed to get this country back on its feet, to create jobs, to reduce the level of unemployment in this nation, has failed. It succeeded to put this country further into debt. But in places like Weld County and Greeley County, where unemployment is record highs, in places throughout the Eastern Plains, unemployment continues to force families to make difficult decisions about what they're going to do